diplomatic talks on the Ukraine conflict. We will bring all of those to you. Moving on, and the United Nations says Israel is allowing some supplies into Gaza, but not nearly enough to prevent widespread starvation. A UN Human Rights Office spokesperson warned the shortage is a direct result of Israeli restrictions on aid. The office says nearly 1,900 Palestinians have been killed while seeking food since late May, most allegedly by Israeli forces. We'll now listen to what the spokesperson for the United Nations Human Rights Office, Tamim Al-Kitan, has had to say.
We have seen reports that some supplies are entering, and we have seen that there are some trucks entering with supplies. And when we talk about supplies, we're talking about partly humanitarian aid and partly commercial goods. Now, this is far below the amounts that are needed to avoid starvation. And of course, the use of starvation as a weapon of war is a war crime. And we continue to call on Israel to allow in aid in sufficient amounts for the population to be able to survive.
Well, Israel denies responsibility for hunger in Gaza, accusing Hamas of diverting aid. It says it has increased deliveries, paused fighting at times, and created protected routes. Well, joining us to discuss these comments from the UN, Israel's response, Peter Baum, a foreign editor of the Weekly Blitz, who joins us live from London. Peter, always a pleasure to speak with you. Can I get your first reaction to these comments from the UN?
Yeah, his comments were very vague, weren't they? He went on giving the usual propaganda that not enough food is getting in, which is a change from the propaganda of about a month ago when no aid was getting in. And then he went on to say, and of course, but the aid that is getting in isn't sufficient to stop starvation. Well, I've been in touch with people on the ground at the aid distribution centres today, and for your viewers and listeners, I can tell you that so much aid is getting in that the GHF Foundation responsible for distribution has now implemented a couple of pilot schemes in various depots, the first one being in the Saudi area of Gaza, that's what it's called, which is basically a click and collect system as we would get in our supermarkets, whereby the Palestinians in need of aid are no longer having to queue in the numbers they were queuing in, but simply are going into a distribution depot, giving their orders, and that those orders will be supplied to them in the days and weeks ahead, as and when they want it, to stop the queuing. So the UN spokesman, typical of someone who, he said, we have heard. So he's not even there on the ground. He's no idea what's going on. He's just spewing the usual anti-Israeli propaganda. If he were on the ground, he'd be successful. How the aid is now being distributed and redistributed. And there's one other thing that's very, very important to note. The cost of foods in Gaza has dramatically decreased in the last 6 weeks. Why? It's simply because the UN and Hamas business model has been falling apart. Hamas can no longer get access to the amount of food that it was getting access to by stealing from the aid delivery trucks, and GHF's business model and processes seem to be working. Not perfect by any means, but a vast improvement from what it was when they first started, and these new click and collect centres will definitely exacerbate the ongoing positive processes allowing aid into the Gazans.
Yes, Peter, of course there have been more steps made by Israel. Initially that GHF aid distribution was questioned, but as I read out earlier, of course steps have been made to improve that. There are times of the day in which fighting has stopped, other methods as well. But still there are reports from the UN, we have to caveat that they are from the UN, but they say that nearly 2,000 people, around 1,900 people have died while collecting aid. Is there still flaws in the GHF system? that need to be ironed out, so those are avoided, even if progress is being made in terms of aid access?
Undoubtedly. But let me put a caveat by all that. First of all, those killed, it was very common procedure to promote the idea that all those killed were from IDF troops firing at the Palestinians queuing for aid, when in fact we are now seeing footage, too late to win the propaganda war, I'm afraid, but we've seen footage that it was actually Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad operatives that were stealing the aid and firing at the Palestinians. So the UN's statements coming forth on this, when they're not even on the ground, as the spokesman suggested, he said, we are just hearing reports, really cannot be taken with the credibility that the UN were years ago. They've really lost a lot of credibility during this Israeli-Palestinian process, I'm afraid. And it seems as if, though not perfect, the GHF business model, the GHF model, it is working for the benefit of Palestinians. And it's hoped that with the continuation of the dilution of the Hamas power, that the Palestinians will greatly benefit from this new methodology of providing them with the much needed aid.
Yes, Peter, please stay with us. We're now going to move to another development and you will be joining us for that. Armenia